Uh, Sir, shall we start the program?
Right?
Yes,
Can you
sir.
hear, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. Can we start the program, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We can start.
Yeah. Respected Vice Chancellors, academicians, and dear participants, I'm extremely happy to welcome you all for this Upanyasa Malika. Today we are having the 10th lecture series in this Upanyasa Malika. The topic for today's lecture is effective governance, leadership and management for quality enhancement in higher education. Our today's speakers are Professor S.C. Sharma, the Director of National Assessment and Accreditation Council, Dr. S. Srikant Swami, Academic Expert, Research and Analysis Wing, NAC. Both the speakers are familiar to you. So far, they have delivered 9 lectures under Upanyasa Malika. Professor S.C. Sharma is a renowned educationist and academician, will be giving his talk on the need for good governance and the importance of developing infrastructure. After his presentation, Dr. Srikant Swami, a senior academician and a seasoned researcher, will speak on effective governance, leadership, and management in higher education. Now I request Professor S.C. Sharma, Director NAC, to deliver his talk. Sir, please.
Namaskar. In today's Upanyas Malika, I'll be talking on good governance and infrastructure for quality enhancement in higher education institutions. Again, I am grateful to Professor Srikant Swamiji who has initiated this wonderful Upanyasa Malika. In fact, there are many factors for effective performance of higher education institutions. Higher education institutions with A++ grade have achieved significant improvement with respect to the development of infrastructure and optimum level of utilization with good governance. In today's talk, I will be touching on good governance and need for developing infrastructure to meet quality requirements of higher education institutions. Governance. The way in which an organization is managed at the highest level and the systems for carrying on to achieve the purpose refers to governance. There are 4 elements here. One is the structure. The subcomponents under structure are organizational, design and reporting structure and the structure of the committees and charters. Second is responsibilities. Third is talent and culture. Fourth is infrastructure. Need for good governance. During the last 5 decades, governance and planning of higher education institutions have undergone significant changes. In fact, the challenges and conditions facing higher education have changed significantly, resulting in changes in the nature of institutional decision making and planning strategies. The traditional non-participatory style of planning and decision making, which was in the past, had to necessarily change. Change is inevitable. Colleges and universities needed new approaches to deal with the tidal wave of new generation students and growth of research and development. Institution needs guidance in crafting its relationships with major environmental forces of change, assessing the status of all the institutions. It requires a new style of planning and decision making. In fact, master planning and information based decision making grappled with the challenges of facilities and programs posed by larger numbers of new students and new requirements. The growth in size and complexity of institutions was accompanied by need for more participatory decision making and some decentralization of power. One of the important strategic challenges confronting higher education institution is the set of issues dealing with faculty, administration, manpower management, and the workplace need to be addressed with all kinds of seriousness. The current faculty shortages in growth discipline are harbingers of the coming shortages in other faculty discipline. The name good governance, the techniques of planning should be creatively applied to these areas. In fact, earlier I have discussed about academic administration. Administration should be given primary importance for effective performance. Although academic administration is a challenging task, it is not taken in that spirit by many administrators. Consequently, the whole process of higher education, with the present NEP requires a re-engineering process, and this is very important, and administrative responsibilities are relegated to the management of the institution, and rest of the system is not geared up to evolve them in the process of translating the mission to reality. Very often the prime focus, namely the students, becomes secondary in the whole process. The management of higher education institutions should be participatory and democratic to be able to achieve the noble purposes of higher education. This will happen in the name of good governance. The key components of such a system are input, process and output. Input comprises of resources required to enable the system to operate. They include tangible resources, finances, information technology and intangible resources. Tangible resources are personnel, service and goods which need to be brought together to enable the system to function, including teachers and supporting staff, of course equipment, building and land space, etc. Finance is essential to facilitate the procurement of many other essential productive resources. All resources have a time dimension. They can be made available with a time frame. Usually they have limited lifespan, and this is a continuous process of improving, and consequently it depreciates over a period. And for example, salary of a student represents the service of one of the person for a fixed period of time, and each individual has limited working life, and while his knowledge and skills will normally be even shorter lived unless regularly upgraded. So this change is very important. You will have to have change in the related syllabi and timetables also. And information is a crucial resource for higher education, and information is available in plenty that has to be channelized, and the specialized information may be extremely scarce. In order to obtain and use appropriate information, the other resources need to be expended, such as staff, time or finance. And technology, with the fast pacing run of higher education institutions, everything is now driven by technology, and computer and communication technology is very important, internet connectivity, etc. So with this communication technology, you can reach out to people just as we are reaching out during the time of COVID. And education is participatory learning. A teacher who teaches, the student will also know, get to know a lot of details by Google search, internet enabled learning, etc. Process describes in which resources are combined in a system to produce results. The technology of education, however, with certain exceptions, is remarkably stable and has remained for so many years. And the truth is, the teacher, teaching a class of students should be highly, he should have innovative thinking, and it should be technology driven. Technology is the next buzzword in the next century, and without technology, I think we may perish. Therefore, which is very, very important. Then the second one is outputs that represents the immediate results. And now even the syllabi also continuously will have to go on changing, because it is more of a skill oriented, and major difficulties which arise have to be dosed down and solved, so that the students admission and student you'll have to welcome the students, and the students are very, very intelligent, and therefore we have to be very good in our planning. Thus planning and good governance contributes in enhancing the technology. The second one is infrastructure. It is needless to mention, change is inevitable. The laboratories, if it is obsolete, the students definitely will not take admission. Therefore, the laboratories and the college infrastructure, maintenance, providing good quality education, and computer laboratories, all these things are very important. And this is one of the most important component is our infrastructure. Of course, teaching, learning, teachers, as well as technology. And with technology, good governance automatically is achieved. I think Professor Shrikant Swami will explain in detail and give a detailed lecture about all these things. And thanks for listening to me, and I am grateful to one and all of you. Thank you. Namaskar.
Governance and also its importance. Amya Kumarji, thank you. Yes, sir. Amya Kumar, sir, you can. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You can continue, sir. Then can I start?
Yeah, you can start the program, sir. Now I request Professor Shrikant Swami to deliver his presentation. Sir, please.
Thank you. Once again, warm welcome from my side to all those who are participating in this program. As Professor Amya Kumarji has mentioned, this is the 10th in the series of Upanyasa Malika, and the focus is on the two important criteria what NAAC has considered under the A&A process. Criteria number 4 that will be covered today, as well as the criteria number 6. Therefore, governance, leadership and management, these are the three areas which I will be focusing, and more focused would be on a little bit on infrastructure as well as more on governance. I think a lot of debate is going on with respect to the infrastructure on one hand as well as the governance on the other hand. Many experts in the field of education, they say in the field of business, the governance can gain momentum and it will be having its own impact, because there are various models available in the business area, like the Italian model, then Indian model is also there, German model, then we'll be having the UK and American model. These are all the models which have been evolved gradually after the First World War. Then they wanted to know how exactly the business sector is focusing. And thereby they wanted to know, by improving the efficiency of governance, it is possible that the performance of these organizations can also be made better. In this context, the implication with respect to the application of governance in the field of business has become more popular, and all these models were used by business sectors, and thereby the organizations are flourishing to a greater extent. So what we may ask, is it not possible for us to take some of the good practices of good governance which are there in the field of business to education? I think here the interface started. Many started saying, even by providing administration, earlier we used to speak, by giving good management, we used to highlight upon that. Then further we used to say, speaking more on the leadership and the different styles of leadership will improve as well as enhance the quality. But gradually, as I mentioned, the interface of governance has come somewhere or the other along with these three aspects, and it has contributed to a greater extent. That's why everybody is talking about governance. Our criteria 4, criteria 7, they also cover about governance, about leadership, about management, as well as the infrastructure that is required to run the show in order to provide quality, keeping the global standard in mind. With this aspect, then some people also will say infrastructure and quality, though many studies have revealed in research, higher degree of correlation is there. Some experts they say, few years back we did not have infrastructure. With all these things, we have produced good students, we have produced good citizens. That argument is also there. But the earlier the scenario was different. Restriction was there with respect to the financial aspects, then difficult to mobilize the resources. Thereby we were all managing with the available resources. Therefore, the infrastructure what we had 20, 30 years back cannot be compared to what infrastructural facilities we are having today. Therefore, things are changing, facilities are more, we are able to mobilize the resources, funding agencies are more. Therefore, experts are saying, I think we have to improve the infrastructure, because infrastructure and performance, higher degree of correlation is there. Therefore, we have to go ahead with providing the necessary infrastructure and facilities to students. They should not be denied of. So many varieties of products are available, applicable to education field, applicable to engineering field, applicable to medical field. Therefore, are we not supposed to use them to provide better education? I think this is the background. Therefore, in my opinion, governance is important. We have to make use of this concept in the field of education, and providing the educational facilities is also equally important. With this, let me start my presentation. Now, the effective governance to enhance the quality in higher education. Can we increase the slide size? We will go to the slideshow and then try to expand. Okay. Now, what is this governance? What is a good governance model? I think we'll go to number 1 because we have skipped the slides. Yeah, we have to go to 1, or shall I change it? Okay. Yes, we can go to the slide number 1. Arrow mark, you can use that arrow mark, is easy. First one, okay. First one, and then slide size I said now. You can go here, with slideshow on the top. Is it there? So the full screen can be covered. F5, press F5. Full screen can be covered. Okay. Yeah, Suresh, kindly press F5, function full screen. Sorry for the interruption. Now the first, there are few slides I have prepared, and I am going to start with this governance. What is good governance? I will start, and then the good governance model I will be just highlighting upon that. Now the first one is with respect to what is a good governance model. the concept of good governance model is difficult to define and comprehend in a sentence or two because it is an intangible thing. If it is a tangible thing, it is easy. Since it is an intangible thing, it is very difficult to say in 1 or 2 lines. However, experts have already mentioned and they were able to define it to a greater extent. It is a system that has a basic structure that serves as the foundation and support for all of its many parts. It is a representation of the many possible ways that a governance system could work if you were to change one or more of its parts. Good governance model can be built in various ways. The integrity of their infrastructure is often indicative whether an organization will be successful or fail. Beyond that, what is a good governance model is the question that everyone is interested to know. Therefore, here I am just saying that it is a system that has a basic structure. A governance is a system that has got a structure that serves as the foundation and support for all of its many parts. Therefore, the basic foundation for any kind of governance is the structure, because as is the structure, so will be the function. Therefore, how is the structure that has been created? I think that is a starting point for anyone to speak about the governance. Once when the structure is very clear, then we can go for the other aspects which are included as something like in a systems approach. We have got many elements constituting a particular system. In the same way, in good governance, we also will be having the importance of using the different elements which are related to the governance. I think that is how we proceed in order to explain about this. Now, the second one is why is a governance model is important. Governance systems are complex and multifaceted. An organization's mission, the second one, okay, 1 minute. Okay. I think the second one is regarding the complex concept of governance accounts for many things. One thing that it is not fit for every organization. Therefore, whatever the structure I am going to have for my organization, it may not be suitable for other organizations. But therefore, we have to customize the basic structure of any kind of governance. Keeping the other elements in mind, we have to structure and we have to customize the whole thing for our own system. Imagine an education institution trying to adopt its governance structure in the same way as that of a banking system. Will it work? Bank system, they have got their own structure based on which they have got their own governance, and they are having the objectives, keeping the structure and the objectives, formation of different committees, and at the same time they are just conducting lot of programs based upon the structure and also with their objectives. But will it work for an education system? This is the fundamental question. Therefore, one should be careful with respect to this. Each organization has its own goals and objectives, and each organization has a different set of stakeholders. Our stakeholders are students, whereas in the business field they say clients, they say their customers. Therefore, unless the stakeholders knowledge is there, without that it is very difficult for us to make our governance an effective one. Hence, education institutions should have their own governance structure that will be suitable for them, keeping their purpose, keeping their goals, and also keeping their stakeholders. Now, in the next slide, you are going to see the importance of a governance model. Various kinds of models are there. A model provides a structure that can be mirrored, modified, or changed. So, various kinds of models are there. Many research students also have come out the different kinds of models, connecting the elements of that model and making how exactly collectively these elements function in order to make that governance more effective. Therefore, a model provides a structure that can be mirrored, modified, or changed. Models give us a starting point that can indicate how an organization needs to improve. Many experts also will say models are the proven techniques. Based upon the evidences, whatever that they have gathered, they have developed the model. Therefore, model, if we can understand the meaning of the model, if we can select a good model which suits to our institution, automatically the governance becomes very smooth and we can go for the effective governance. Models give us a starting point that can indicate how an organization needs to improve. A governance model demonstrates the types of consequences that we can expect and the risk that will likely to be associated with the model. So some models also will just give some components. And then based upon these components, then doing justice to these components, relating these components and their functioning, it is possible for us to think of what will be the consequence of implementing this governance model. If we adopt this governance model, after 5 years, what will happen to our performance? After 8 years, what will happen? In that way, we can see the consequences. Therefore, in some models, the institution has to take the risk, because unless you go for innovation, the stagnation will not help to attract the students. Stagnation will not help in order to provide the necessary knowledge, skills and competencies to the students to meet the global challenges. But in some models, they say, no, you have to take the risk factor and then adopt certain things. And then only it is possible for you to compete with the other institutions which are doing very well in the global level. Therefore, whatever the type of governance model that we are going to select, we should be extremely careful. After selecting the model, we should also be able to know the consequences of adopting this model to give a better governance. And then risk factor may also be involved, one should be aware. And without this, that risk factor, it may be very difficult. So for example, some of the experts who have gone there as assessors have suggested, sir, in the COVID-19 period, why can't we have the online assessment? That is a beautiful, innovative idea suggested by some experts, preferably those who have gone as assessors. Idea is very good, but the risk factor is there, because we have to ascertain that the peer team visit is substituted by online visit. We have to make sure that the institutions should not suffer. Therefore, we have to make sure that the institutions which are getting A grade or A++ grade, because they are coming for online, in case if you are going to introduce the online assessment, online visit, substituting the general peer team visit with the online, then some institutions may afraid that their grades may come down, objectivity may not be there, and it may be very difficult for them to provide everything in a convincing manner on the online with the technology. Some people also may be afraid in saying that some institutions may cook up the evidences in a different way using the technology, and they may come forward to get a big grade. Therefore, somewhere the people are saying any kind of innovation, if you are going, resistance is one thing and the risk factor is another thing. Therefore, in the governance model, one has to keep the risk factor if you want it to change. Change and the risk factor will go together. Innovations and resistance will go together. We have to manage these two aspects. Governance models that are weak or non-existent create distrust across the board. The lack of trust usually leads to a lack of financial support. Of course, in the case of business, it is possible, because business means always they think of getting profit. Therefore, any kind of structural change in the board structure, it affects the governance pattern, and which in turn some people may say it may affect the financial support. And lack of trust among the members, among the board members, if there is no confidence, no understanding, and some kind of trust is not there, then they may think that the organization may not function effectively. The expected financial outcome may not be there, benefit may not be there. They think in that way. It also leads to financial and reputational risk. Something that is even more concerning is that the lack of trust can lead to several legal problems and can destroy an organization. In that way, in the field of business, they are extremely careful in selecting the model and also just running the model with proper governance, because business means money, business means profit. These things will go together. Therefore, one should be extremely careful. But it does not mean if we can apply the same kind of models or similar models to education, risk will not be there. No, risk will also be there. Though we are not going to deal so much in terms of finance, but we are investing the finance for our tomorrow's future of our tomorrow's students. Therefore, any kind of investment in a business through proper governance, they may get lot of profit and money and they can survive. Whereas investment in education, we may not get the yield immediately. We have to wait. We have to wait for the returns in the field of education, whereas in the field of business, immediately we get it. Therefore, that comparison is not possible. We should not do it. But however, we have to think of which is the best model that we can take in to our educational system, so that we can think of monitoring the system in a better way. We can provide a good leadership, and we can also go for a better management by means of which the outputs are better, and ultimately we may compete with the other organizations, similar institutions, so that the sustainability will be more. I think that is an important point that I am stressing here. Modern governance provides the tools for good corporate governance. Once again, I sorry for taking some examples from the business field only, because ultimately I'm related to education. Therefore, let us try to know what those people are doing, how they are doing, and can we take up some of their practices, best practices to our own educational system. In that way, I'm just referring. Today's business world is highly complex and interconnected, which makes the concept of governance models even more important. All organizations in existence today are subjected to increased connectivity, visibility, and scrutiny. I think you're all familiar how best an organization can connect to the customers, how best an organization can connect to the other organizations. Therefore, connectivity is very, very important. People, those who are connected well, they are going to survive for a longer period. Those who are not connected well, they are not going to survive for a longer period. Connectivity is one thing. Then the transparency, or what you call the visibility, is equally important. That's why people will say that through our brand name, we are going to be visible to the people. Our products are known because of our advertisement, they may say. Our products are known because of the quality. And we are more visible to the other people through our products. That's why connectivity is one thing, visibility is another thing. And lastly, they speak about the scrutiny is another important thing in the field of business. The better the scrutiny, better will be the quality of the product. Now, can we take these three aspects to our education? Can we say we are also connecting at different levels of administration? And we are also visible through our good activity, good performance, and good curricular as well as co-curricular activities. Whatever we are conducting, we are visible. Whatever the different types of programs we are running in the name of technology related courses, or the social science related courses, or science related courses, or commerce and management related courses, are we visible? I think we can make our visibility also to be more in the field of education. Then the scrutiny may not be so much useful in the field of education, like how they are going to scrutinize at different levels. But however, the spirit of that can also be taken into education. Therefore, the connectivity, visibility, and scrutiny makes our system little more effective, and thereby we can compete with the other global institutions if we can adopt these three principles which are there in the field of corporate governance. Business and non-profit leaders are more accountable than ever for their success and failures. Board performance is a crucial part of the governance model and is generally a strong indicator of an organization's potential for success. In the business, they will ask, who is your CEO? Who is your board chairman? Who is the chairman of your board? They ask. Because you have seen some of the companies which were struggling which were doing so well, all of a sudden they had a mighty fall. Many companies had a mighty fall, including the software companies. Many industries, all of a sudden, they have come to an halt because of various reasons. But they say wherever good governance is there, wherein the board is very strong in the field of organization or in the field of corporate sector, where the chairman is a person with lot of experience, a person with lot of vision, I think he can make the company to still survive with all competitions all over the world. Still, he says whatever may be the competition, I am going to withstand because of my good products. I think the same spirit we have to follow in education, that we should be able to maintain the quality. With that quality in terms of our teaching learning, quality in terms of our competences and skills, whatever we are developing to our students. With these aspects, it is possible that we also can just say we are adopted a good model. With the good governance, it is possible for us to compete and maintain our quality and achieve whatever the educational objectives or goals that we have framed. It is possible to achieve. That's why business people, they say, tell me your CEO, I will tell you how your organization is going to work. Like Steve Jobs, most of you are familiar. Bill Gates, you are familiar in the field of software. Many great people, they have worked. And initially, you know where they were and how they have come up. Everything is because they followed the good governance, implemented very effectively, involved the right of our people, share the responsibilities, decentralized, and because of all these things, they were able to come up. Therefore, board performance is equally important in business. Similarly, the educational management is equally important. In our education system, how is your management? Who are the members of your management? What are their experiences? What are their commitment? I think many will say, sir, we are not able to succeed. We started and we are not able to compete with the other organizations. Many will say. But the basic trouble or the problem lies with the way in which the management is functioning, the way in which the members are there in the management, or the way in which the members are selected for the management. In some places, as I discussed earlier about the different types of culture, like a clad culture, different types of culture that I mentioned, in the same way, organizational culture, in the same way, in some places, only family members are running the show. Thereby, they are very close. They are not open to get the ideas from outside source. With the result, some of them were not able to give a big show. They are just managing and then saying that they are existing. This is one story. In the other educational organizations, the management is open. They select only the top people, experienced people, without any kind of bias, without any kind of influence. Thereby, the management is very strong. And as is the management, so will be the show. And with the result, institutions are doing very well. In institutions with 500 students, they say, sir, we start with 21 students. Now we are having more than some 12,000 students, they say. Matter of how many years? Matter of 15 years, matter of 12 years. How it is possible? Because they believe that we are able to manage the show, and in management we are very good. Our leadership is very good. Our connectivity is very good. Our visibility is very good. Therefore, we are doing. Then experts will be saying there are 10 principles to build a good governance model. Therefore, they say around 8 to 10 points you have to keep in mind, even in the field of education, so that whatever the governance model, in the good governance model, people are using certain principles, same principles we can take it up. We implement the same principles in the field of education so that we also can do very well. And here the first point, they said there should be a clarity regarding individuals' responsibilities, organizational expectations of executives, and the role of executives and steering committees. That is the field of education. Similarly, in the field of business. Similar in the field of education, we say, what about the expectations of the institutions? What the institution is expecting? Then what type of responsibility that they want to take up? And ultimately, the individual's responsibility should be clearly mentioned. Who is who and who has to do what. Like that, the first point, even education institutions, we should be able to define these aspects as whatever that they have defined in the field of business. Structure and composition. An executive committee needs to have the right group of people, as I mentioned earlier, having a particular regard to each individual's background, skills, experience, and how the addition of an individual builds the collective capability and effective functioning of the committee. Therefore, structure is important, composition is important. If too many people are there, it may not work. Therefore, the required number of people should be there, and thereby our adminogram, it should be very, very clear to outside people that this is how these people are running. You have to make that idea very clear. Then what is the purpose and what is the strategy that we have to adopt? The executive committee plays an important role in setting the vision, purpose, and strategies of the organizations, helping the organizations understand these and adopt the plans to implement them. Therefore, what is the purpose of starting a college? Sir, we want to start an engineering college. What is your purpose of starting? Sir, we wanted to start a college, women's college. What is the main purpose of starting the college? Therefore, the one is the general visibility. The other one is the one which is not visible, but people have got so much of faith with that purpose, intrinsic purpose that they may be having. And therefore, the intrinsic purpose with which that they are starting gradually should become an extrinsic one, making people to know about it. Therefore, purpose is important and the strategy is equally important. Then in the field of business, they also speak about risk management. They say, like if somebody wants to start a mobile company, they have to think twice or thrice, because already in the market so many companies are there. They have produced very beautiful products, very beautiful mobiles, many smartphones are available there. If someone wants to start, don't you think that it is a risk factor involved? Because how we can compete with the people which have started 50 years back, 40 years back, 80 years back, 30 years back? Therefore, risk will be there. Similarly, with the education institutions, if somebody wants to start a medical college, don't you think the risk factor is there? Pharmacy college, the risk factor is there. The general degree college, risk factor is there. But risk factor is there everywhere. But we have to address the risk factor so that you will be more comfortable to run. Otherwise, risk factor will become a block. Then that will not obstacle and that will not allow you to proceed and make your dream to come to true. Your dreams may not come true because you are not able to overcome that. Therefore, risk management is important. By putting in place an appropriate system of risk oversight and internal controls, executive committees can help increase the likelihood that their organizations will deliver on their purpose. Therefore, when the risk factor is there, the chairman or the members of the committee, they should be able to say, don't worry. Supposing if there is a loss for 2 years, we are all here to make up. We are all here to bring the money from some good source. We will make up. Don't worry. 2 years, let us be in loss. 3 years, let us be in loss. 4th year, 5th year onwards, we are going to get the profit and we can run the show. In that way, risk factor is there, and at the same time, commitment should be there. Wherever the commitment is high, then it is possible that we can overcome the risk factor and we can proceed. Otherwise, there cannot be continuity, there cannot be progress. Organizational performance is equally important. They say among the 10 principles, this is also equally important. How the organization is functioning, what about its performance? The executive committee determines and assesses appropriate performance categories and indicators for the organizations. Therefore, experts will be saying, here you are not doing, here you are doing, in sports you are not doing, in cultural activities you are not doing, with respect to the other skill development activities you are not doing well. Therefore, somewhere within the organization, the experts should be there, or you have to invite the experts from outside, and they are the right people to suggest how exactly you are performing. If you are performing in the right direction, good. If you are not performing in the right direction, I think you should be corrected. Then committee effectiveness. An executive committee's effectiveness may be greatly enhanced through careful. We have come across many institutions where the committee members are not very strong. They are not innovative. They are not exposed to any other novel ideas. They have not traveled. With the result, stagnation is there. Therefore, effectiveness of the committee members is equally important. Then appropriate accountability. It is important that the executive committee ensure there is a flow of information to the board. In general, they are saying, and then they are also saying decision making, one important point. Transparency is another important point. Accountability is another important point. Therefore, we have to make sure that we are accountable to the students. We are accountable to the society. We are accountable to the parents. Therefore, if you are running a governance, through the governance now, you should be able to keep these principles, and through these principles, you have to say that we are accountable to the society. We are accountable to the government. We are accountable to the parents, as I mentioned. I think then transparency is equally important. Whatever, that's the reason NAC, whenever the NAC goes for the assessment, they ask the institutions to be more transparent and provide evidences to show that they are transparent. Internal assessment, are you transparent? Giving the financial assistance to the students, are you transparent? Because orally they may say evidences are not there, means they cannot be convinced. Therefore, there is a need for us to convince, and if the transparency is there, people will appreciate the transparency, they will support for the common cause, and the institution can just run for a longer period, and thereby it can flourish easily. Organizational maturity is equally important. The executive committee has a role to play in enhancing the capacity and capabilities of the organizations they serve. Organizational maturity means 10 years back how we were, 5 years back how we were, 3 years back how we were. Have we enhanced our capability? Capacity building programs for teachers, then the administrative training program and skill development program, like the different types of programs are there, through which the institution can say we are maturing, we are progressing, we are developing. This is equally important for anyone to know that the organization is progressing. Then culture and ethics of the organization is equally important. That's why every organization is to have its own culture. We call that as organizational culture. Then ethics important. Every institution say these are all our code of conduct. They say code of conduct. These are our ethics. Then this is how we have developed the culture. Our culture is quite different compared to the other culture. I think you must be knowing, to give a very simple example, in most of the Western countries like America, I have gone there, and any kind of product you take, one GPS product, any kind of product you take, you can keep the product for 15 days, 8 days, 10 days, they give you some stipulated time. Within that, if you are not satisfied, you are permitted to give that product back to the company. They give you the full amount. Is it not a surprising thing for not all of you, all of us, but for some people it is surprising. Here they put the brand. Once when the item is sold, we cannot get that item back. There they say you take the item. If you are satisfied, you keep it. If you are not satisfied, you can return. We are ready to take it. I think what makes the people to go to that extent of announcing like this? In the same way, in our education institutions also, I think we should be able to convince the people, saying that our culture, we have got an open culture. Our culture is not closed culture. We are open because we admit all categories of students. We are open because inclusive education we are providing. We are open because we are ready to accept any kind of innovations, suggestions for innovations, we accept it. I think in that way, culture and ethics is very important. Therefore, if you are giving good educational administration, you have to keep the ethical aspect in mind, code of conduct in mind. Plus, you also should say that our institution has got its own culture. Because of that culture now, certain things are common. The model behavior, model personality will come among the students because of that culture. A student studying in a religious institution, some of you must have seen, they express some kind of common model culture, model behavior that cannot be seen with some other organization, because that culture makes them to behave like that, makes them to develop that kind of personality that is equally important. Then proper good governance under that requires time and thought from committed leaders who understand the benefits of aligning every level of an organization to produce desired results. Therefore, it starts once again from the time factor requires time. All of a sudden, you cannot develop an organization. Initially, a lot of hurdles, lot of problems will be there, but gradually you have to overcome those problems. Therefore, it takes time. And then then commitment is equally important. Leaders should be committed to the cause, number one, commitment to the leaders, students, number two, commitment to the teachers, number three, commitment to the society. Therefore, all leaders, they should have commitment to the organization and commitment to the stakeholders. I think with this, it is possible that this factor also will help for good governance. Then good corporate governance ensures that a business environment is fair and transparent and that employers can be held accountable for their accountability, which I have already mentioned. The same point is repeated here. And then here the good governance means wastage should be avoided. That's why we say no energy waste, very important. Then water waste should not be there. That is another important point. In the same way here, they are also insisting that waste should be minimized so that it leads to better profit. Then transparency should be there, one more point that they have highlighted, and mismanagement should not be there. Good management means right type of person doing the right type of job, utilizing the right type of resources, that leads to management. Mismanagement means opposite of all these things, right type of person in a wrong place or wrong type of person in a right place, which leads to mismanagement. Even the corruption aspect, as you know, education institutions should become more transparent. The idea is actually examination related issues. If it comes, how are we transparent? When it comes to admission and collecting the fees, how are we transparent? Management quota is there, government quota is there, collecting the fees. Now I think in paper we come across so many issues. Therefore here, accountability, transparency, some of these aspects accounts for running a good show in the institution, thereby name and fame automatically comes to the institution, wherein the quality education can be provided. Regardless of the type of venture, only good governance can deliver sustainable and solid business performance. I think sustainability and good governance, they say. If good governance is there, sustainability will come. I think in the management programs, experts will be saying, in a good organization, if all these things, principles are there, if good governance is there, any kind of change that happens to the institution will not affect the quality of the institution. For example, today one principal is there, he retires. Next day another principal will come. The system is so strong, the system has been built based upon these principles, that the new principal's entry will not affect the quality of education what the college is providing. But in some places you have seen, X was the principal, one style of functioning, Y is the principal, another style of functioning. Why it happens? Because we have not streamlined the system, we have not structured the system, we have not developed the good governance in that particular system. A good system in which good governance is there means any kind of small changes that happens here and there, it should not affect the main mission of the organization. The organization should continue for a longer period. I think this is what they refer to as good governance model. And even in Arthashastra, one or two points that I have taken, like the Arthashastra was authored by Kautilya, as all of you know, 300 BC. In both internal administration and foreign relations, the comprehensive of its treatment is almost unparalleled. Although Kautilya proposed an elaborate welfare state in domestic politics, he was willing to defend the general good of the state with harsh measures. Kautilya says the ruler must aim to be a Vijugishu, one desirous of conquering other territories, aiming to ensure Yogakshema and Loka Samagra of his subjects. Kautilya regarded economic activity as a driving force behind the functioning of an elite political dispensation. Here are 2 points I would like to take up. One point is a leader's idea is to make the organization to grow. He has to bring the resources, mobilize the resources outside, Thereby, he has to look into the yogakshema of the people who are there in the organization. That is his primary concern, and hence this idea can be taken that the leader's responsibility is to nurture that organization, nourish the organization, and he is responsible for the welfare of the organizations in total. I think that is one important point what we can take up from this Kautilya's that Arthashastra. Kautilya was a true statesman who bridged the gap between experience and vision. Good governance was paramount. If your experience is good, if your vision is very clear, he says governance is a paramount. It is possible for you to run a good governance provided your experience is good, you have got a better vision based upon your specific purpose and objectives. He suggested built-in checks and balances in systems and procedures for the containment of malpractices. Kautilya's philosophy is based on the principles, 4 principles you are all very familiar: Sama, Dhamma, Danda, and Behead. Persuasion, temptation, punishment, and division. These are the 4 aspects, he says. These are the various different and sequential aspects responsible for some kind of achievement. Therefore, somebody wants to achieve something great, makes the organizations to come up to the expectations of the society. I think these 4 principles, he says, very important. And ultimately, he also used the word, what is this dharma? Use the word dharma, which in general means duty and righteousness in personal and social conduct. Therefore, the principles dharma is to run a big show. He is meant for that. And whatever the show he is giving, he has to do it in a right way, but not in a wrong way. Righteous conduct should be there to give. I think some of the aspects I am highlighting here, which means to say 300 BC only, whatever the few aspects we are talking about good governance, Kautilya has visualized and he has covered some of these aspects long back, and even now some of these aspects are useful. People are practicing, and since they are practicing, they are able to achieve lot of success in the field of education. Good governance in Kautilya's literature is aimed at fulfilling the welfare of the people. In the happiness of the king's subjects lies his happiness. So if the students are happy, I think the principal must be happy. If the staff members are happy, principal must be happy. Similarly, if all the departments are doing very well, vice chancellor must be very happy. In that way, our happiness is committed to the welfare of the people for whom we are accountable. This is what that has been told long back. Therefore, the welfare of the people. In their welfare, he can see his own welfare. If the organization is doing very well, if the welfare of the organization is good, automatically his welfare will also be good. I think this particular point that has been highlighted long back. Therefore, we also can take it up. Now, friends, this is the first part. I have shared some aspects relating to the good governance. What are the components of good governance? What are the basic principles? How the concept of governance also has been addressed as early as 300 BC by referring to Kautilya's Arthashastra I just mentioned. Now, the second part I am going to speak more on this e-governance everywhere people are talking. Even in our criteria number 4, and here also we speak a lot of aspects. In 6 also we speak about this. Like they say, the institution has a clearly stated vision, mission, which are reflected in its academic and administrative governance. Therefore, whatever the good governance we have spoken, there one aspect is with respect to the administration aspect, another aspect with respect to the academic aspect. In both the aspects now, what initiative that we have taken in the name of good governance, so that academically we are doing well, administratively we are doing well. Therefore, this aspect the visiting team members will come. They ask you academically what is that you are doing in the name of good governance, administratively what is that you are doing in the name of good governance. I think in criteria 6.1. Matrix 6.1.1 that they have mentioned. Then similarly, under 6.1.2, Effective leadership is reflected in various institutional practices such as decentralization and participative management. Therefore, under the leadership, the leader, he has to decentralize certain aspects. In your institution, is your leader is decentralizing or not? They ask that question. If they say with lot of evidences, little weightage will be there. Your grade will be little higher. Then participative management is equally important. Everywhere people are talking about that PPP concept. Therefore, a good leader is one who always believes in this participatory management, and he has to encourage everyone to become part of the program. And some of the people who are there in the field of corporate sector, they believe in this participatory management, and they encourage, and they are all flourishing. Like that, we also will ask, the peer team members will ask, in your institution, do you have this? In that way, the two important metrics also covers. E-governance concept is also covered, and I would like to cover some aspects regarding to the e-governance or electronic governance. One of the most modern initiatives to establish good governance is e-governance. We are living in the area of technology. Therefore, everywhere we use technology or integrating technology. Computer application is there for a greater extent. Our information processing technique is also extremely good. Therefore, why can't we make our governance an e-governance, so that with less number of people, or sometimes with very rarely with few people, you can run a big show, you can monitor, and you can get the outcome to a very greater extent. You will be very happy about the outcome, provided you know how to use the governance with this electronic media. At present, the features of e-governance are observed in almost all developed or underdeveloped and developing countries for fostering their development process. Therefore, developing countries we are having, developed countries we are having, and all these countries, they go for this e-governance. They are using the technology to a very great extent. So, it is important. Its importance in today's world is immense. Then below are the answers to all the questions related to e-governance. Where are we using the e-governance? Are we using it in the private field? Are we using it in the government? Then are we using it in an autonomous situation? I think in everywhere we can think of e-governance. Administrative aspect we can make use of. In the field of academically also we can make use of. But how do you use it? Where do you use it? To what extent is our concern? Then what is a e-governance or electronic governance? A new paradigm shift has been developed in the field of governance by the application of ICT in the process of governing called electronic governance. Therefore, the more emphasis in electronic governance or e-governance is application of ICT, information and communication technology. If an institution uses this information and communication technology to a greater extent, that means they are going for e-governance. Even in NAC, we are very happy that our ICT unit, they believe in e-governance. Many things that they are doing using this technology. And our process is more transparent, more robust. Quickly we can do the things. And transparency is so high that people can trust. Therefore, e-governance has got lot of advantages and lot of benefits, as I mentioned, because they apply the information and communication technology to a greater extent. E-governance raises the transparency, accountability, efficiency, effectiveness, and inclusiveness. See, these are the 5 to 6 important attributes that they are talking about e-governance. One attribute wherever e-governance is the transparency. Even you have come across prime ministers, many schemes are based upon e-governance. Because of e-governance, corruption has stopped. Because of e-governance, many people are getting benefit. Because of e-governance, everybody will come to know how the distribution process is going on, how people are functioning at different levels. It is possible because of e-governance. Most of the developed countries, they have got more faith, more facilities, and they are having e-governance. We are also following the same thing in India. Then accountability is important. Efficiency, automatically efficiency becomes more. Using the manpower, any kind of a type of work that you are using in 1 month, using this gadgets plus based upon the concept of e-governance, I think within a day, within few hours, you can do the whole show. Therefore, e-governance has become very popular. Effectiveness is also there. Inclusiveness is also there. In the governing process, in terms of reliable access to the information within the government, between the government, national, state, I think the connectivity is very, very easy in e-governance. You can connect from government to government, you can connect the local to government, urban, all these kinds of connections is possible. Therefore, Dwivedi and Bharati in 2005, they have conducted a study, and there they are saying the advantages are transparency, accountability, efficiency, effectiveness, and inclusiveness is more, and connectivity with all the other the government and non-government systems will also be more. The main focus of the e-governance or electronic governance is to provide the transparent, equitable, and accountable services delivery to the citizens. Our main concern, they say, we want to serve the people. Similarly, if you want to serve the students, if you want to serve the students in a better way by providing and utilizing all the facilities, why can't we go for e-governance? Through e-governance, you can manage, because there is a question we ask per day, the percentage of students and staff using the library per day. One question is there. I think then you have to open the register. We have to check first day how many students have gone, second day, third day, fourth day, calculating. But in the name of e-governance, automatically the moment the student enters, you will come to know in a gadget how many people have entered in a particular month. What is the percentage of people who have utilized the library? You will get that information very easily. That's why technology has become more popular, more transparent, and accountability is also there. Then, e-governance is not just about government websites or email or financial transactions. It will change how citizens relate to government as much as it changes how citizens relate to each other. I think Katyal, he says, it also refers to the utilization of IT in the country's democratic process itself, such as the election. I think they are talking in general how the e-governance is possible during the election period, how we are able to manage. We have to apply, make an attempt, invite the people who are very good in this e-governance, taking their help, and so that we can manage. I've come across few people already, they have developed some softwares. Informations. We will digitize the whole thing. After doing the digitization of information, it is possible for you to categorize and get a kind of information, whatever you want. 10 years back, how many students, information is available. How many staff members, information. Percentage of results in arts, in science, in commerce. All kinds of information it is possible. You can get it through e-governance. Even a lot of correspondence can also be done very effectively using this. In that way, in the field of government level, people are using, state government that they are using, education many people are using, universities many universities are using, many colleges are using, deemed universities, central universities. Therefore, why can't we increase the possibility of using the e-governance wherever it is possible? If you make up your mind, it is possible. I think as I said, with one system, with good memory power, lot of information can be put, and with a lot of analysis, you can come out with the different types of dashboard by means of which you can do lot of analysis that makes us to plan and predict for the future. I think that advantage is there with this. E-governance is about the use of ICT for steering the citizen, as I mentioned. It includes a pragmatic application and usage of ICT for delivering efficient and cost-effective. Cost-wise, I think good. Wherever we are using, we can minimize the cost through the human labor. We can minimize with less number of people, more number of more percentage of work can also be elicited with less number of people. Efficiency will become more, effectiveness. These are the two keywords everybody is talking. Even this Prabhu in 2015 also highlights these two aspects, namely efficiency, how it is going to be, and the cost effective service and information and the amount of information, what you are going to deal, what you are going to store, what you are going to analyze will also become easy for you to do that. It made correlations between state and society, government. I think different types of people are using at different level. We can also make use of it. Access of information is the key factor for making democracy successful. Similarly, with the application of ICT, it is possible that we can get lot of information can be stored, as I said. The new global information had been mobilized in the institutional transformation in the sphere of mechanical and organic structure of the society. It has rapidly been changing the way of life of the people in the face of liberalization, privatization, and globalization. In the period of LPG, the main emphasis upon the governance. More emphasis upon the governance. Better the governance, better will be the achievement of our objectives and the purpose. Better the governance, better will be the service. Better the governments, more number of people will be going to get the benefit of the various kinds of schemes available. The digital revolution, information and communication technology, a new paradigm has been developed as a new public management in the theories and practice of public administration. In public administration also, they speak more on this. The aims of NPM are economic capacity, efficiency and effectiveness. In this context, the study of governance and its relation with ICT becomes more relevant. Where people are talking about ICT, implications and applications of ICT, and with the result leading to governance. And under the governance, they say highlighting upon the e-governance. A simple formula, what is this e-governance means? ICT plus governance is equal to e-governance, they say. Electronic governance is nothing but the combination of the principles of governance on one hand, ICT principles on the other hand. Combine these two, that leads to e-governance. So wherever e-governance is there, application of ICT is there. That's the simplest formula to understand. And what are the different objectives of this e-governance if you wanted to be a little more specific? Number one, to make every information of the government available to all the public interest. Therefore, information access, like I want to know how many books are available in the library. I need not go to the library and I not check. I can sit at home by just using my laptop. It is possible for me to find out how many journals are there, how many books are there, how many reference books are there, how many dictionaries are there, how many encyclopedias. It is possible for me to just get if you are having the e-governance practice. To create a cooperative structure between the government and the people and to seek help. I think another important advantage of e-governance, you can also have connectivity with the like college and university, affiliate college with the concerned university, then different universities across the state, universities across India, they also can be connected, and it is possible for us to have a beautiful cooperative structure among the universities and among the colleges. To increase and encourage people's participation in the governance process. E-governance will help you to make many people to participate. Anywhere, any corner, people can sit and they can open and they can access. In that way, participation becomes very easy. More number of people are going to participate, like how people are using WhatsApp and participating, Facebook and they are participating, Instagram and participating. Similarly here. To improve the country's information and the communication technology and electronic media with the aim of strengthening the country's economy by keeping the governance, people and business. I think here you can just slightly relate it to our education. With this, you can connect many aspects of your departments can be connected. The assessment marks can be kept. Assessment, credentials, credits, all these things can be easily kept and stored, and you can access. Many students can access to their own information whenever that they want, they can access. A student who has studied in the college, he has gone. After 10 years, after 15 years, he can access to the information, how much marks he got it. All the information if you want, you can do it, provided in your institution you have got this e-governance application. Then to establish transparency and accountability in the governance process, we use it. To reduce government spending, I think reduces the cost, as I said. Reduce the cost. If you go for e-governments now, so much of money you can save, and so much of heavy work you can do it. And with the application of this e-governance, you can plan very effectively for the future, because you know the cost benefit analysis you can do with the help of that, and you can do very well. Similarly, certain features also have highlighted that e-governance means it has been proven from the concept of e-governance that it is powerful means of public service, student service, and de-bureaucratization. Due to e-governance, the gap between the people and the government, that gap can be reduced. Teacher student, that gap can be reduced. Principal staff gap can be reduced, because all kinds of information is available. Then e-services, its main feature is the provision of services through the internet. As a result, we have got G2C, G2B, G2E, etc. I think in the next slide I'm going to mention that. International service connect the people across the globe. As I mentioned, it is very easy. Therefore, a lot of features are there with the e-governance. It enhances the right to express to the citizens. Using the means of e-governance, anyone can share their views with the government. I think because of e-governance that is there in the government, earlier to contact the Prime Minister difficult, contact the President difficult, higher education is difficult. In the name of this e-governance, you can communicate, give your opinion, give your ideas. Even a common man who finds it very difficult to contact the higher authorities, he can contact them very easily. Similarly, higher authorities can contact any citizens, any good work. If it is uploaded in a social media, you will come to know about it and they can recognize. I think very good idea. People are talking, we have to make use of it. And we have to see that every institution should insist upon that. Higher education institution should insist upon the e-governance. And they have to do, evidences should be there that they are using it. Reduce inequality. Here, I think all categories of students can use this. E-governance provides opportunity for everybody. In a face-to-face situation, you can differentiate in terms of language, differentiate in terms of creed, color. May not be good in the eyes of law, but however, people can do and they are doing it. But in the name of e-governance now, you can treat everybody equally, equal opportunity for everyone, irrespective of caste, creed, color, and thereby it reduces inequality. I think some of the aspects that I mentioned, and different types of e-governance are there. As I mentioned that you can just see here, 01, then G2C. In the other places, I'm going to explain the procedure about the different types of e-governance, how people are using. Like G2C means government to citizen. Therefore, government to citizen, any citizen, he can access to the information from the government. Similarly, in the educational system, a student should be able to access to all kinds of departmental the informations which he can access. Therefore, government to citizen, like student, or in university to the student. Then government to government, university to university, you can have contact. Student to student, they can have contact. Government to the business field, that they can. Similarly, university to the industrial sector, university to the corporate sector, they can have connectivity, have the database, and they can share their data. That's called G2B. Government to employee. Similarly, you also can have the relationship with the employer because of placement facilities. What you are having now, you can have university to the employer, college to the employer, then the employer to employees. Different types of connectivity can be done using this e-governance. I think a lot of implications are there. You have to plan now. You after listening to my talk, a simple assignment would be taking a piece of paper, or before that you can do once again to strengthen some of these ideas. You can go and search online and get a detailed information pertaining to e-governance in education, e-governance in universities. You can kindly go through it, collect a little more information, and after that you can just write down about your organization, about your institution, and list out which are all the places where you can go for e-governance in your organization. Sir, library, we go for it. Very good. Then other one, sir, examination, we wanted to go for e-governance in the examination area. Like that, you list out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. After listing out, probably you can try to find out where it is possible, where it is not going to be possible. Now, friends, in the second part of my talk, I have given certain tips and information pertaining to the general meaning of e-governance and how exactly the general meaning of e-governance can be adapted to the educational system. In brief, I have just mentioned with examples, and ultimately I have mentioned what are the objectives and what are the advantages of going for e-governance. As I said, transparency, visibility, reducing the cost I mentioned, then overcoming the inequality, then the concept of bureaucratization that can be overcome through that. So many important points that I've just shared, keeping that in mind. Then the second part is third part is regarding the infrastructure is equally important. Like in our matrix, we have got the facilities for classroom teaching. What facilities do you have in your classroom? Maybe earlier we used to say the writing board, blackboard or the green board. Now we may say ICT based classrooms wherein we have got facility for using the PPT. What are the slides we have prepared? Directly you can go to the class and you can use it. Earlier were the days where we used to carry the overhead projector to the classroom, setting the whole thing, then teaching to the students, then carrying back the overhead projector. There we used to write the whole thing using the marker pen on the transparency sheet. Now some of the classrooms are highly equipped. Only the professor has to get into the classroom, that's all. Smart boards are there. Everything is there. He can just make use of the technology to a greater extent. Therefore, we ask facilities, infrastructural facilities pertaining to teaching, learning, we ask. Laboratory situations, we ask now. Relating to the sports, we ask certain questions. Do you have a conference room? Do you have a seminar room? Because higher the facilities you are having, greater will be the outcome, greater will be the benefit. Many studies have revealed. And here one or two few aspects I am going to cover in general by taking some examples, maybe at the secondary level. A classroom, according to that particular some country that they are mentioned here, buildings, classrooms, laboratories and equipment, education, they all constitute the infrastructure. They are crucial elements of learning environments in schools. Thanks to those people, because earlier were the days where students used to sit under a tree and they used to learn, because technology was not so much advanced, engineering technology was not so much advanced. They were not able to utilize a lot of material aspects for the construction purpose. Therefore, that was the situation. You have also heard of how students used to learn in Shantiniketan, sitting under a tree and learning from that Gurukula system. But we cannot compare. In my opinion, we have got facilities, utilize the facilities, mobilize the facilities, give these facilities so that the students can learn comfortably and they can contribute back to the society to a greater extent. There is a strong evidence that high quality infrastructure facilitates better instruction, improves student outcomes, and reduces dropout rates among the other benefits. I have taken this example from the school level because many students are attracted to go to the school because they have got better facilities in the schools. Sorry, if you go to the school, we can use that laptop, we can use the PC, we can use the computer, we can play the computer games. Therefore, many studies have revealed at the school level, infrastructure and the students' enrollment, there is a higher degree of correlation. Infrastructure and science learning, there is a higher degree of correlation. That's why I have taken this example. One more example is a recent study from the UK found that environmental and design elements of school infrastructure together explained 16% of variation in primary students' academic progress. Similarly with our college students and similarly with our university students. But since they are familiar to some of the gadgets, they may not appreciate to a greater extent at the college level unless these gadgets are very much useful to them. Whereas at the primary as well as the secondary level, students are fascinated with these gadgets and thereby they are attracted and their participation becomes very high. This research shows that the design of education infrastructure affects learning through three interrelated factors. Namely, they are talking about the naturalness, the stimulation, and also individualization. All the three are possible that they are saying. That means you can bring a natural environment to the students, you can stimulate their learning in a better way, and technology also addresses the individual differences. That's why in technology, in some of the self-learning materials, you are all familiar, you can give the self-learning material to the students, ask them to learn on their own. They can take their own time. Therefore, learning pace, they can take their own time and they can learn. If we ask the teacher to go slow, he may not like. If I ask the teacher to go fast because I'm a fast learner, teacher may not like. Whereas in the gadgets, it is possible. That's why I said individualization and individual instruction is possible, and it overcomes the individual differences. Therefore, infrastructure is essential. It has proved at the primary level, secondary level, college level, and especially in some of the laboratories, science laboratories, wonderful experiments can be done with the gadgets. Without the gadgets, no experimentation. Some of the theories can be tested very well with the gadgets, with the equipments. Therefore, I think infrastructure is a must. We have to develop, and NAAC also insists upon the infrastructure. One is having the infrastructure, the other one is utilization of the infrastructure. Then, although education policy makers are increasingly focusing on the quality of education school learning environment, many countries use a fragmented or piecemeal approach to investing in their education infrastructure. Of course, there are some in countries they don't believe in because they are not afford to develop the infrastructure, whereas most of the developed countries, they believe in it and they have developed it. And here some statistics that I have given. Here, for example, 72% of our rural secondary schools are missing a science laboratory, and nearly 40% do not have some facilities. I think keeping the paucity of time, I will skip. But what I wanted to cover here, the infrastructure facilities includes everything. As I said, small classrooms, maybe library reading rooms or reference rooms. There are universities which have got small rooms in the library meant for university students to go, and they can play their CDs, they can use their pen drive, and whatever that they have copied, they can just see, they can have a small conference and they can discuss and come. And in 25 years back, I read in the paper that in some of the very good libraries in America, students can go, request some copies, and free of cost they used to get the printed copies there, because they wanted to encourage the students to use the material. Otherwise, if you ask the student to take a picture, he has to pay 50 paise, 1 rupee. But there it is not like that. You want, or a student, show me your ID card. You want how many copies? 50 copies. Please wait, I'll get you. Like that, the Xerox facilities was made freely available to them. But in how many colleges you are providing free cost, free Xerox facilities for them? But now the things are improving. The things are very much changing. Therefore, infrastructure includes everything, keeping the student and lab, student and the classroom, student and then let us say canteen, student and hostel, then student and then toilet. Therefore, everything is connected with the student. Therefore, all the facilities for the student, similarly with the staff, should be provided. And the pathetic situations are there. In some of the places, it is not like that. Now, to conclude, adopt the philosophy of good governance. I think after listening to my talk, you should be able to adopt a philosophy of good governance, believe in good governance, participate, have a little more discussion there, improve the leadership functioning, because leadership and management adds for this now. If the management is very good, it adds to good governance. If leadership is very good, it adds to good governance. They will try to improve the leadership qualities as well as management principles you have to apply. Then infrastructure should be developed, which is a must now. Then orient the staff members through invited talks and training programs by the specialized people regarding this particular area. And after doing that, then you can go for answering some of our metrics which are there under criteria number 4 as well as criteria number 6. That will help you to do very well. I think this is what I wanted to share. Therefore, I appreciate for your participation. Therefore, keeping this particular of background in your mind and try to get and acquaint yourselves about the e-governance as well as the good governance practices that are there in some of the well-established universities and colleges. Try to find out, get some kind of feedback about this with them, and especially those who have got A grade, A++, they are all doing very well, and especially engineering colleges, some of them are doing this e-governance. They are using to a very great extent. Therefore, I want you to take some of the good models what they are practicing, and you can do better. Therefore, thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much. I just stop here. Thank you. Mr. Habib or Amir
Yes,
Kumar ji? Yeah. Any questions? If there are some questions, one or two we can just take.
Yeah, participants, you can ask the questions. You can raise the hands and ask the question. You will unmute.
I think no questions. Habib?
No questions, sir.
Just ask anyone has written in the chat box?
No, sir. No, sir.
No.
No, sir.
Oh, I do not know. Usually they ask some questions.
Yeah.
Sir,
there are some few questions are there, sir.
Oh.
Yeah, please take.
Yeah, please.
Significance of scrutiny in education management.
Yeah, exactly. Now scrutiny, I think that's why I said in business field the scrutiny is very important. Yeah, scrutiny is a process of filtering, checking. In the business field they do it. In an industry also they do a lot of scrutiny with respect to the products. But in the field of education, scrutiny can also be adopted, like the scrutinizing the question papers for the type of valuation what someone has done. Like that, one has to select certain areas in the field of education for scrutiny, and your intention of doing the scrutiny is to check for faults, you have to check for any kind of malpractices, and you have to check for getting some kind of feedback to improve the whole system. In that way, scrutiny can also be done in the field of education. Especially it can become part of your management principles now, scrutiny, because you scrutinize and proceed. The scrutiny will help you to have a better understanding of the reality or ground reality. I think therefore a possibility is there, but many people may not be very familiar about the word scrutiny using there, except in the field of examination other areas. But still you can list out, you can identify, and you can proceed and try to find out from the people where they are using the word scrutiny to a greater extent. Okay. Next one.
Usha Mukundan, you may ask the question.
Yeah, good evening, sir. Thank you so
good
much. It was indeed a very, very excellent session, I would say. Very engrossing. I had one specific questions. We say ICT based teaching. So there is like the moment you say PowerPoint presentation, then people say, no, that is not ICT. If you show a video, you say, no, it is not ICT based. So exactly if that could be defined, then I think that will give more clarity to the teachers. Because anyway, knowingly or unknowingly, this pandemic has made each and everyone adopt that system. But if there is a little more clarity on that, exactly what is expected in that ICT based education, then I think it will be useful to everyone.
Yeah, I think last time I told madam, because why we don't take PPT, because PPT we can take it from any source. Simply we
if it's made by the teacher.
That's why the PPT, though it is made by the teacher, most of them will take it from the outside source, and they present as it is only. It is something like reading the textbook and then making the student to listen. But in my PPT, you must have seen I have used the material, but here and there I used to give parallel examples, supplementary examples here and there, so that so that I used to customize whatever the content I have taken. I have customized the whole thing in order to help the people, those who are participating and getting the benefit. Therefore, PPT, because a lot of PPTs are available online, I can simply take those PPTs and I can present. But real ICT enabled situation means a topic, whatever I am going to teach, it is very difficult for the students to understand using the chalk and talk method. Therefore, I will take that particular talk, the topic, I will take the particular topic. Then I am going to follow the principles of learning. There are certain techniques by means of which you can, or learning management system. Wanted to just add, you can add also.
Smart board classrooms.
Therefore, usually you can customize the whole thing and you can prepare the content so that learning becomes easy. If I teach using the lecture method, student will not follow. But if I just use the learning principles, then I can prepare some slides. Then I can prepare some slides. Then if I am going to use it, learner is comfortable in learning. In the same way, using the smart board, many concrete objects are there, we can show it to them. Some of the objects we cannot show it inside the classroom. Therefore, if you are having a smart board, you can bring those things virtually on the board, make them to understand, and then your teaching becomes easy. Therefore, PPT presentation means taking from somewhere, using as it is, asking the student to read and understand is not correct. Enabling means information, whatever you are giving, should be more correct, more precise, correct and exhaustive information. Then the communication you are giving, communication can be oral or communication can be written. Communication can be oral or communication should be visual. Therefore, in the ICT, wherever certain abstract ideas are there, we will make that abstract idea a little more concrete, showing a visual thing through animation. It is possible, or through some kind of visualizing and preparing a schematic diagram, I can make the students understand in a better way. Therefore, ICT enabled means going through the textbook, understanding the difficult areas, and then to make the difficult area to understand what best I can do. PPT is also all right if you are going to prepare on your own by customizing yourselves, keeping your learner ability in mind. Or else you should be able to use all kinds of informations there. Therefore, ICT concept is little more broader. ICT enabled teaching is little more broader. Most engineering colleges and other people, they are doing so well. I think you can take their help and it is possible, you can proceed, ma'am. Thank you. That's what I want to say. Mr. Vishnu, anything you wanted to say? No, okay. Okay, thank you. Any other question? Even lecture capturing technique is there. You can lecture your own lecture, you edit it, add some animations, and you can show it to the students. I think they are going to understand it in a better way. That can also be a part of your ICT enabled. Using the video cassettes developed by other people, you can bring it, customize, show it to the students. That can also be ICT based. I think in different ways you can do it. Okay, no question? Avi?
No questions are there, sir.
No? Okay. If there are no questions, I think I request Dr. Vishnu Mahesh, the Assistant Advisor of NAC, to propose the vote of thanks. Vishnu Mahesh.
It's my immense pleasure to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. First and foremost, I wish to thank our beloved Director, NAC, Professor S.C. Sharma sir, for his wonderful speech on need for good governance and infrastructure for quality enhancement in higher education. And also his invaluable support and encouragement for making this whole lecture series grand success. Thank you very much, sir. Secondly, I am very much thankful to the today's speaker, Dr. Srikanta Swami sir, academic expert, research and analysis wing of NAC. Sir gave up a deep insight on the effective governance, leadership and management for quality enhancement in the higher education. Once again, thank you very much, sir, for your sharing a valuable time, knowledge and experience with all of us. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
I wish to thank Dr. Amiya Kumar Rath, sir, Advisor NAC, for warm welcome the gathering and also introduction about the program. Thank you very much, sir. I also acknowledge the contribution of advisors, deputy advisors, assistant advisor, and all other NAC staff members. And especially, I thank ICT for providing the online platform for making this program a grand success. Thank you very much. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Okay, thank you.